My name is Travis. I'm 47, and for 20 of those years, I've been behind the wheel of a Ford Crown Victoria, wearing down Chicago's dead hours. I'm not just a cab driver. I'm the city's nocturnal archivist, a witness to all its dark secrets. My car is a yellow ghost, darting through empty streets. The night shifts eat away at your soul. After years on the job, you start to think that all of life is just a road from one street lamp to the next. Just before dawn, when most drivers are already asleep, I feel most alive and most alone. Tonight was the last fare, 4:55 a.m. The time when reality becomes fluid and the city exhales its last, strangest stories. The destination address, St. Agnes Cemetery, an old abandoned burial ground right by the bypass. This place always had a bad vibe. No one goes there. I arrived on a quiet, dark street. I saw him, the passenger. He was standing directly under the dim light of the only street lamp, which flickered like an aging heart. A gaunt man in an old-fashioned, overly long, wet coat. Even from a distance, he emanated cold and mustiness. He silently got into the back seat. The door closed with a dull, soft thud I'd never heard before. The inside of the cab became unbearably cold, even though it was relatively warm outside. The smell of a damp basement and wet earth. "Where to, sir?" I asked, looking in the mirror. "Where you're going," came a quiet, dry, barely audible whisper that seemed to come not from a throat, but from the seat upholstery. I chalked it up to fatigue. I started driving. The entire way, about 20 minutes along the winding bypass, the passenger was silent. His presence was heavy and physical, like a wet stone. I couldn't see his face in the mirror, just the large collar of his coat and a shadow that seemed to absorb the light inside the cab. My paranoia grew. I started thinking about money. He hadn't named a final price, and his coat didn't look like it contained a wallet. But I didn't dare ask. I tried to break the tension by commenting on the weather. "Rained yesterday. Lucky it's dry today." In response, absolute silence. But I felt the cold from the back seat intensify, and I thought I heard a very quiet, dry chuckle that dissolved into the engine noise. I understood that it didn't want conversation. It wanted me to drive, to focus on the road, while it watched me. My thoughts snagged on his coat. It wasn't just wet. It looked like it had been buried in the earth for a long time. We turned towards the cemetery. The fence was tall, wrought iron. Moonlight fell on the sagging gates. They were tightly locked with a huge padlock covered in rust and moss. I stopped the car. "We're here, sir. St. Agnes Cemetery." I waited. The engine idled, illuminating the gates. The passenger didn't move. Finally, I turned around. "That'll be..." The words froze on my tongue. The back seat was completely empty. I felt a sinking in my stomach worse than any adrenaline shock. I had been convinced of his presence, his weight, his cold, his smell. It was all real. I turned on the interior light. On the black upholstery, exactly outlining where the passenger had been sitting, lay a damp, dark handful of freshly dug earth. The earth was warm, despite the cold in the cab, and smelled of organic matter and decay. I couldn't scream. My body failed me. I stared at that earth. When did he get out? Where did this earth come from? I jumped out of the car. I couldn't breathe. I stood in the middle of the road, illuminated by my headlights. I looked around. No one. The road was empty. The cemetery locked. I returned to the car. I opened the back door and with trembling hands brushed the earth onto the asphalt. The earth was heavy and sticky. I was about to jump back in and drive away without looking back. But at that moment I heard a sound. It was quiet but distinct and rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. I looked up. The cemetery gates were still locked. Between the rusty, wrought iron bars, where not even a child could fit, two thin, pale, almost translucent hands were protruding. These hands were unnaturally long, their fingers thin and dirty, their nails black as earth, and these hands were slowly, rhythmically tapping on the roof of my taxi, right above the back seat where he had just been sitting. Tap, tap, tap. As if beating an impatient rhythm, I was petrified. This wasn't just a ghost. This was a claimant to something that was inside my car. I finally screamed. I yanked the door and jumped behind the wheel. I hit the gas, but the car didn't move. I looked at the dashboard. The engine was running. The gear was engaged. The tapping on the roof quickened. Tap, 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 tap. Now it was vicious and demanding. I looked at the hands. They were stretching further, and I saw the long, branch-like fingers begin to slide across the glass. And then I understood. My car was his target. He wanted to take it. I turned off the engine. The tapping stopped. In the silence, I heard a new sound. A sound like slow, wet scratching on metal. I jumped out of the car and ran to the trunk. I got out an old rusty wrench. I turned around. The hands were no longer on the roof. They were inside the cabin. I saw it through the rear window. On the upholstery where the earth had just been, moisture appeared. And from this moisture, those very pale fingers began to grow. They stretched out from the fabric of the seat like shoots and reached for the steering wheel. I understood. The earth was his anchor. His contract. He had bought this ride by leaving a part of himself in my car, and now he was collecting his purchase. Without thinking, I started hitting the seat with the wrench. I struck the places where those fingers were sprouting. The screech I heard wasn't metallic. It was a wet, guttural scream that came right from under the upholstery. The fingers retracted. The earth disappeared. All that remained on the seat was a damp, salt and decay smelling hole like a rotting maw. I ran. I reached the cemetery gates. The gates were locked. I looked through the bars. Inside, in the shadow of the headstone, stood the passenger. He was motionless, but his coat was now full, as if it had absorbed all the moisture and cold. "You're leaving." "Travis," came the dry, demanding whisper. "You're abandoning me?" "This is my car!" I shouted back, feeling my voice tremble with terror. "No, this is my final route." I returned to the car. I opened all the doors and windows to air out the cold. I pulled out everything I could. A blanket, the GPS, the meter. I manually pushed the taxi off the shoulder and sent it rolling down the slope into a ditch filled with dirty water. As the car sank into the mud, I saw the black, wet silhouette of the passenger emerge from the gates and slowly walk towards my sinking car. He didn't defeat me, but he took my life. A month passed. I didn't return to driving a cab. My life was ruined, but I was free from the cold. At night, I started hearing tapping again. Not on the roof, on my window. Tap, tap, tap. I would go out. No one. But on the windowsill, there was always a small, damp handful of fresh, black earth. He remembered me. He had tied me to this route. One night, unable to bear it, I took my old rusty wrench. I went outside. It was parked at the curb, my old Ford Crown Victoria. It was covered in a layer of dirt and silt, but it was running. No one was in the passenger seat, but the seat was damp, and it smelled of cold, and then I saw something new on the side of the car. In huge, sloppy letters, scratched into the paint, it said, "Travis, next route, you will drive me home." I understood. I had become his vehicle. I got behind the wheel. I couldn't resist. My body moved against my will. I drove. I drove back to St. Agnes Cemetery. I drove slowly, guided not by reason but by instinct. At 4:55 a.m., I stopped at the gates. The passenger was standing there in his black, wet coat. He opened the door. And then I saw his face. It was white as chalk, and it was smiling at me. But his eyes were empty pits full of damp earth. He got in. His weight crushed the seat. "Thank you, Travis," he whispered. "You fulfilled the contract." He didn't get out. He began to sink into the seat. His coat, his body, his earth, everything was being sucked into the fabric. And at that moment, I felt the cold. Not on my skin. Inside. I understood. He wasn't taking the car. He was taking me. I jumped out of the car. I ran to the gates. I started climbing the rusty bars, and then two thin, pale, terribly long arms reached out from under the driver's seat and grabbed my legs. "Don't leave, Travis. Your contract is eternal." He pulled me back. I heard my joints cracking, but I fought. I tore my legs free. I climbed over the gates and fell onto the dirty grass of the cemetery. I lay among the graves. I was safe. I looked at the road. My car stood empty, and then I understood. The passenger had returned, but not alone. Next to my car stood a crowd, figures in old-fashioned coats, all with pale, thin hands. And they were all looking at me, and they began to tap on the hood of my car, on the roof, on the gates. Hundreds of pale hands beating an impatient, ominous rhythm. I am imprisoned in the cemetery. I am their new driver, and every night at 4:55 a.m., I will hear the tap and know that their last route is just beginning.